Welcome to Red-tastic. Story 1. So I, 24 male, got kicked out of my parents' house at 17 because they found out I'm gay. It wasn't a surprising reaction, but it was very messy and left me in bad shape physically and emotionally. I stayed with a friend the first couple of nights and then turned to my older brother, then 25 male, now 32, for a place to stay until I turned 18 and could get my own place more easily. He basically told me he was sorry about what happened and didn't agree with our parents' actions, but ultimately taking me in would get him cut off too. And he didn't want this to get in the way of his inheritance, so he wasn't going to help me any further than giving me a lift to a hostel or homeless shelter. I told him to ram his shitty non-offer and I would sort myself out. I've come a long way since then and I'm finally doing okay. I'm not what anyone would consider rich by any means, but I'm comfortable enough. I have a long-term boyfriend now and we own our flat and I like my job. Until a few months ago, I hadn't spoken to any of my relatives in about 6 years. In July, my brother got in contact again and he's not doing so well. His years-long gambling and drinking problems have finally caught up with him, and things have started to fall apart. Cut to now, and he's lost his job. His wife has left him, and he has also had a huge fallout with our parents. I don't know why, but I suspect it's over money. He came to me for help earlier this month, basically wanting a financial bailout so he could continue to live in his house and not have to downsize or anything. Besides the fact I couldn't really afford to bail him out, I'm still really effing angry about him turning me away when I got chucked out. I told him as much and basically said, use the inheritance I was in the way of. He got really mad and called me all kinds of shit. Obviously he thinks I'm an a-hole. My boyfriend says he doesn't think I did the wrong thing per se, but I could have been the bigger man and at least done something to help him. I don't know. It's late at night and I suppose I'm thinking it over and second-guessing my convictions. Was I the a-hole for this? Edit. A note because I realized I missed this, and it might be relevant. The inheritance wasn't from our parents but our paternal grandparents, who were very well off but very much sided with mom and dad on kicking me out and cutting me off. The grandparents have both since died, her 5 years ago, him last year, and I assume my brother got the money but has somehow blown it all. Edit 2. When my brother initially reached out, he did so under the guise of wanting to know how I am, but by the literal next day he was asking to borrow money, which at the time I did lend him because it was small amounts here and there. Also, like he hasn't apologized or expressed remorse for what happened in any capacity, which makes me feel like he doesn't really want a relationship. He just needs cash, you know. Ironically enough, it's likely our parents' fault he's ended up the way he has, especially financially. Our parents are pretty wealthy and while I'm grateful for all of the privileges that were granted to us in childhood, they pretty well spoiled us and never taught us the value of money at all. It was always a case of, if you want something, buy it, and if your pocket money won't cover it, ask dad and he'll buy it. We never got taught how to properly save or about working for your cash or anything. I really cringe thinking about it now, to be honest, because I'm so far removed from it now. Point is, I had to learn the hard way about financial responsibility while I was still incredibly young, whereas he didn't have to do it until he fell out with his parents in his 30s, when he has already gotten used to a certain lifestyle and become set in certain ways. Not the a-hole OP, you don't owe him anything, and I doubt he really expected much from you anyway. You were a last resort. It's funny that he lost the inheritance money gambling. He made a bet on which family was worth keeping and which was worth losing, and he lost that bet too. Your brother has a history of making very, very poor choices. Perhaps when he hits rock bottom, he will start to reassess and work out what's really important in life. Now for some comments. He's a gambling addict. The small amounts he asked for were tests leading up to this big task. Not only are you not the a-hole, if you do help him, he will absolutely blow your money and be back asking for more. Unless you would like to buy his pretend affections, there is no relationship here. He needs rehab and therapy, not enabling. Your money can be put to better use. At most, you could offer to pay for rehab if you can afford it easily and are extremely generous. I can't advise enough against giving him any more money directly though. You would be funding his addiction. For F's sake, don't give him money. You will not get it back, and he will just ask for more. If having a relationship with your brother is something you want, offer support in other non-monetary ways. Help to find counseling or other relevant support services. Health, budgeting, etc. No cash, no. I would be livid if my brother pulled something like this and would have a hard time even being civil. But you sound much nicer than me. That said, if you don't feel like you have the ability to provide any support, tell him so. Brother, I am not in a position to offer you that support right now. Was your response harsh? Maybe, but well deserved. And I do like a good comeback. Your brother's situation is not that bad. He hasn't lost his house, he just needs to downsize at the moment. It seems he's over his head, maybe because of his gambling. A relative is a former gambler, addict, and he says the best thing ever happened to him was people not giving him any more money. It made him realize people were not helping him anymore, so he should do it himself. He had a hard time before looking for real help, but now he's been sober for a few years and has a better mindset. Sadly, your brother has a bigger problem than downsizing. Hope he sees it. Then you can help him not with money, but by being there. Story 2. I'm 25 female. Dad and I have a whole host of issues. But the parts relevant here are that when I was very young, I had a kid. When I told my dad I was pregnant, we had a huge fight and didn't speak again until my 18th birthday, a couple years later. I came out to him as bisexual and told him I had a girlfriend. We then had another fight and went back to no contact for another couple years. We haven't seen a lot of each other since then, but things have been better. Or at least I thought they were. He's met my daughter and my girlfriend of 2 years, and while he still doesn't seem totally okay with either of them, he appeared to, at least, be making an effort. Now Dad is getting married. He and his fiancée have sent out an email with a date asking who can attend, apparently to get an idea of numbers for their vendors. There was no mention of a +1 on mine. I figured it was because of everything going on right now, so I wasn't massively upset. And I know that child-free weddings are a thing, so while I was a little annoyed at my daughter being excluded, I understood it to an extent, as while she's a kid, she is still his only grandchild. But then I found out that my brothers got identical emails, except theirs also asked if they need a +1. To be clear, my email did not have this. Of my 6 siblings, all but 2 are single, and the 2 in relationships have both been with their partners for less than a year. It's just me who didn't get the option of a +1. He has also invited my cousins, who are younger than my daughter, so it's not a child-free wedding either. Dad called me to ask if I was coming, and I directly said that I know I was the only one to not be offered a +1, and that I felt it was kind of shitty of him to exclude not only his only grandchild, but also my girlfriend, who I've been with longer than both my siblings have been with their partners combined. Dad responded that it was his wedding and his choice who he invited, and he doesn't know my daughter or girlfriend well enough to include them. I said in that case it's probably best I don't come either. Dad said I was acting immature and unreasonable and kept nagging me to change my mind. Until a couple days ago when I told him, among other things, to piss off and blocked him. A couple of my brothers heard what happened from Dad and followed up with me, saying it was Dad's choice, that the future wife's family are conservative, so that's probably why he left them out, that explaining my situation was asking for drama, and that it was entitled of me to expect a +2 when everyone else only got a +1, before telling me I should apologize and attend. Am I the a-hole? Information: the cousins who were invited are 4 and 6. My daughter is nearly 10. OP, it is your dad's wedding. He and his fiancée are allowed to invite or not invite anyone they choose. That said, you broached the subject with him respectfully. He declined to allow the 2 additions and you also declined his invite. I don't blame you for not going. The a-hole here is your brother for pushing you to go alone to not start drama and to apologize when you have absolutely nothing to apologize for. Your dad is an a-hole for not bothering to get to know his grandchild or his daughter-in-law and then making comments about not knowing them when it was within his control. Now for some comments. To quote the late great Terry Pratchett, no practical definition of freedom would be complete without the freedom to take the consequences. OP, your dad is free to invite or not invite whoever he wants to his wedding. He just has to accept the consequences of being a total a-hole, not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. I would consider cutting your dad out for a while. It sounds like he's ashamed of you, which there is no reason to be. You are a mom, not with the child's parent, super common, and you are in a healthy relationship. Be grateful for that. Just tell your dad why you won't be coming and say you won't talk about it anymore. If he brings it up again, drop him. Say the same thing to your family. Not the a-hole. His excuse is that he doesn't know them well enough. And whose fault is that? His. If he knows your cousins who are younger than your daughter well enough to invite, and he knows your siblings' partners who have been in shorter relationships than yours well enough to invite, then there's a bit of a pattern here. He has chosen to exclude your life. He wants to keep pretending they don't exist, but wants to pretend like he also has a good relationship with his daughter, which is ridiculous. Story 3. My parents have announced to my sister and I they are selling the family house to go into early retirement. It's something I'm a bit upset about. My sister kind of is, but won't directly say it as she's worried she'll appear ungrateful. I haven't said anything to my parents about being upset, and probably won't, as I doubt I'll be able to change their mind and don't want to ruin our relationship. For ages, I'm 30, my sister is 26, and my parents are 60. Some background information as to why I'm upset. My parents are reasonably well off. Solid middle class, not upper or lower. They bought their house when they were a couple of years younger than me and got significant support from my grandparents on my mom's side to do it. They didn't really need that support and used the money they saved to do a bunch of traveling around the world. My grandparents told me if I went through university, which I did, they would do the same for me and help me buy a house. My mom knew about this and mentioned it as an incentive to do university. My cousins were told the same thing. Unfortunately, my grandparents passed away while I was studying and my mom and a sister got all the inheritance. My grandparents didn't leave a will. My aunt used that to support my cousins in buying their houses. My parents used it to renovate their house. When I asked whether I would get the same support as my cousins, my mom shut it down and said it was her inheritance and she could choose what she wanted to do with it. My parents didn't support myself or my sister in purchasing a house at all. And unfortunately, house prices in my country have exploded. So my current house is significantly worse than what my parents bought 35 years ago, at 20 times the price. Same for my sister. Our family home was in a town that became a resort town, so property prices boomed. Both my sister and I had to move away. We were hoping one day we would inherit the house like my parents inherited from their grandparents and use it as a family holiday house that my sister and I could take our children to. Instead, my parents are selling so they can move into one of those pricey retirement resorts. They would likely burn through their money and leave nothing to my sister and I. Having researched the place, it's even likely that once they run out of money, they will be evicted and my sister and I will have to pay for an actual retirement home in their old age. I guess I'm upset because they aren't giving my sister and I the same advantages they got from their parents. It feels like they are taking for granted what they got and think we don't need it. Edit. Since people aren't reading it, grandparents said they would help my sister and I buy houses. Passed away before they could. Parents used their inheritance on renovations and travel and didn't help us. My aunt used hers to help her children, my cousins, buy houses. Aunt has expressed disappointment to me about what my parents did. Now for some comments. You are not an a-hole for expecting this after your grandparents basically laid the foundation for you to get a foot in. Your parents are a-holes for spending that money after your grandparents wanted to give it to you guys. you would be the a-hole to sit there and expect an inheritance, go out and make your own money, and maybe, if your parents decide to leave you anything, it will be a nice little bonus. I know people in their 40s that are just sitting there wasting their life away, waiting for their parents to die. They have achieved nothing in life. That's sad. Well, have a discussion with them. Explain what you just wrote. Say you feel they were unfair. Then show the math you did to show they will need some money eventually. In return, show them how much they would make renting their house, etc. Ultimately, it's their decision, but it can also be your decision to help them to duck themselves. They act selfishly and not help them when they need money. I mean, what kind of parents do not help their children like this when they did benefit from the same help? And they went against your grandparents' wishes to help you buy a house after your studies. No a-holes here. I'm not going to call your parents a-holes for doing what they want with what is legally their money. I'm also not going to call you an a-hole because I can understand why you feel the way you do, particularly in regard to the verbal agreement you had with your grandparents. What I will say is that you need to move on from this, but have a long memory. Given the circumstances, I would put my foot down there. If they can't budget properly with that money, it's not your job to bail them out. In the same way, they didn't feel that it was their job to help you out when you needed it. Since by that stage you may have children of your own, and by the sounds of it, you want to do better for them.